Like many of you watching this video, I absolutely love landscape photography. I enjoy being outdoors looking for images to capture. I love the process of capturing those images, and I also get great enjoyment from later editing those images. I actually think I spend most of my time doing things related to landscape photography. As a photographer, it gives me great fulfillment when someone wants to buy one of my photographs to display in their home or office. And I think it gives me equal fulfillment, if not more, when I'm able to help other people improve at their own landscape photography. And that's where my landscape photography workshops come in. I've been making videos on this channel, I think, for well over 2 years now. And in that time, I've only ever once very briefly mentioned my workshops, so I want to talk a little bit more about them in this video. I run group and one-to-one workshops, but unfortunately we're all in quite an unpleasant situation at the moment, so I feel I can only run one-to-one workshops safely. And of course, I only do that when current guidance allows me to do so. I follow all the guidance and I run them as safe as possible. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about these workshops in this video, and I've recently run a 2-day one-to-one workshop as well, so I'm going to give an overview of that and you can hopefully enjoy hearing how that went. My workshops are all based in Scotland, and currently I run them in Moray and in the Highlands of Scotland, including areas such as Torridon. This lets me cover everything from coastal photography to woodland to hills, mountains and lochs. I've lived in or relatively near these areas all my life, and over the years I've spent countless days in these areas, so I know them very well and I have a love and a respect for each area that I visit. One-to-one tuition can last for a few hours or a few days depending on requirements, and I tailor my workshops to what the individual would like to cover. As you can imagine, I cover many different topics in detail such as composition, focusing, camera settings, creative techniques, filters, learning to see and think like a photographer, light, how to turn pleasing scenes into effective photographs, woodland photography and much more. I love discussing both the visual and technical aspects of landscape photography. So let's move on to having a behind the scenes look at this recent 2-day one-to-one workshop which I was running. I'm not going to go into great detail and cover every single topic that was discussed over the 2 days, but I hope this will be a nice summary experience. When I'm running workshops, of course my priority is the photographer or photographers which are with me, but often I'll take some images myself. This helps me explain on location certain points, and also after the workshop it's very useful for me discussing editing these images with the people who have been with me on the workshop. So I was very optimistic leading up to this workshop for the weather. There was some fog and mist forecast for both of the 2 days, which got me really excited as I love photographing in those conditions. Unfortunately, when we met on day 1, long before sunrise, there was no fog or mist, and it was actually quite overcast, so I adjusted my plans a little bit to account for that. And the first topic we discussed on day 1 was composition and how we could hopefully capture a nice photograph out of all the really nice scenery which was around us. This is the first scene that we captured. Before capturing this photograph, and all throughout the 2 days, focusing was discussed in detail. I believe that knowing which parts of a scene you want to be sharp or acceptably sharp, and then knowing technically how to achieve that is vital to getting good results. There are of course lots of different thoughts and techniques regarding focusing in landscape photography, and during the 2 days of the workshop I discussed these in depth. I discussed how I approach focusing in landscape photography and how my actual technique that I'm using can vary based on the scene that's in front of me and what I'm trying to achieve technically. I also discussed various in-camera tools that we can use to assist us with focusing and how I would review my images to check for sharpness. As time moved on, I noticed off in the distance that there was a break in the clouds and some light was hitting the top of a mountain. So I decided that we should move into position, get our telephoto lenses on and try and capture the layers and the light. Here is my version of the scene. Unfortunately, when I got round to taking my photograph, the light had gone. It's still a nice image, but perhaps you can imagine how it initially looked to us when the mountain on the left had nice light on it and the top right of this image had a break in the clouds with some nice light shining through. Next, I wanted to keep encouraging use of the telephoto lens and looking for small sections of the almost 360-degree views all around us to photograph. I was drawn to a colourful silver birch, the winding patterns of pine tree branches next to it, a smaller pine tree, heather and beautiful distant mountains. I used this scene to show how a telephoto lens can pull all these details together into an effective photograph. As the day went on, again we found ourselves in front of some beautiful views. However, the light and sky in the distance were not complementary to capturing the wider vista shot. Instead, we chose to focus our attention on a colourful tree. I encourage thinking a lot about how best to photograph the tree before actually setting up to take the shot. I discuss some creative techniques, what altering perspective does to a scene, and the camera settings I'd use based on what I am trying to achieve. These photographs were taken after switching to my 16 to 55mm lens on my Fuji X-T4. Here are a couple more photographs which we captured on the first day of the workshop. Both the photographer with me and myself used cameras from the Fuji X series. So over the 2 days I was able to share a lot of information about features and settings I use in my camera to help me when on location. I talked about how I like to set up my camera in a very specific way and how I deal with exposure on location, so I know when I open up my images in Lightroom there will be no surprises and I will have an excellent starting point from which to begin my edits. The following day we met early again in front of a beautiful loch, and we were both absolutely delighted to find there was thick fog all around the loch. Looking at the scene in front of us, I felt we would get our best compositions by using a telephoto lens. So before the actual light began to get nice, I encouraged walking around the loch side, looking for potential telephoto compositions, but also keeping our eyes open for any nice foreground that would work for a wider angle shot. We did find some foreground, but I discussed why I didn't think it would work with the scene that we wanted to photograph, and also why, even if the foreground had worked, I thought the telephoto lens would be a better choice at this spot. So we got our cameras set up, got the telephoto lenses on, and here are the compositions that we worked on as the fog and light changed in front of us. With the sun up and the fog beginning to clear slightly, we headed into a woodland, and we were delighted to find these beautiful spiders' webs all over the woodland which were moist due to the weather conditions. It would have been very tempting to try and photograph these, making them the main feature of a photograph, but I wondered if we could find a different main subject and subtly incorporate these beautiful spiders' webs into the shot. I decided upon this tree, which I felt was the perfect main subject for the conditions that we had. Here I talked a lot about composition, paying close attention to our surroundings, depth of field, where to focus, and the effects of changing perspective. Here I encourage use of my tripod to show the benefit to this scene from having some additional height. And of course we made sure to include those spiders' webs. This is another woodland scene which we photographed. I felt there was another strong composition to be had here of this tree, however the light was not complementary for that, so we worked the scene and settled on this angle. As always, composition, depth of field and focusing were discussed in detail. Other topics at this spot, which again were also discussed in detail a lot throughout the workshop, were the importance of visualizing the final crop and effective use of a polarizer. Unfortunately by now the fog was almost completely gone, but here are a couple more scenes that we worked on, and this allowed me to discuss various technical details. The light was quite flat when I took a shot of this scene featuring the Scots pines. However, there were some nice highlights in the main tree when my workshop participant took their version first. Other topics I discussed and where appropriate we actually used over the 2 days were exposure bracketing, focus stacking, various thoughts on how some of the photographs we took would be edited, RAW versus JPEG, testing a lens for sharpness and much more. I feel it was a great 2 days and I'm satisfied that the participant left with some nice photographs and some new knowledge to put into good use in their own landscape photography. Following the workshop itself, we have been in touch discussing the editing of the photographs, which I personally feel can be really useful. So that's it for a recent 2-day one-to-one landscape photography workshop which I've been running. Landscape photography workshops can of course cover some common themes that keep coming up, but I also find things vary considerably from workshop to workshop, depending on a person's individual requirements, and I try to tailor them to those needs. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video and found it useful if you've been considering coming on a workshop with me. If you would like to come in a workshop with me and we can spend some time at trying to improve your landscape photography, please get in touch with me via my website and I'd be absolutely delighted to try and help you improve. But for now, as always, thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate it a great deal and hopefully I'll see you in my next video.